We're talking about may bagong directives ang Malacanang for accreditation of coverage of Malacanang.
Oh, wow.
Kaya may hugot tayo from somebody na from an ancient time.
Oh.
Si Manny Magato, who covered Malacanang.
Our Pulitzer
I covered
President
Malacanang
Pulitzer
nung
Award.
panahon ni Ramos.
Oh, wow. How was
Oh.
it? I didn't know that.
Nako,
Hindi show natin.
anong talaga?
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Si FBR, a very workaholic.
Yes.
Siguro yung press office is producing maybe 10 stalls a day.
Churning out.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Kaya wala kaming oras
Yes.
mag-enterprise.
Kaya doon si Manny tulog parati.
He engaged with the media daw, di ba?
Yes.
Oo.
Every
Talagang-
Wednesday, he holds a press conference.
Nakilala niyo talaga siya.
Oh.
And what was the style? Was it a kind of a
Alam mo,
formal, informal? mix?
There was transformation eh. Kasi when Ramos was still a soldier, no, chief of staff, napaka-rigid, napaka-stiff.
Yeah.
Nag-walk out pa sa amin yan.
Kung hindi niya gusto yung
Siya
tanong.
nag-walk out sa inyo, ha?
Oo, tumayo siya. Malis, hindi na gusto yung tanong namin. Pero when he was president, nag-iba. Naging friendly, naging engaging.
Tapos,
May
nagjo-joke,
mga jokes.
humor,
Yung nga lang, corny.
Yun lang, medyo...
Okay, at least he made an effort.
Kasi he was a minority president eh. He knew
Oo.
he had to cross
Pero nakita mo yung
Party
transformation
lines.
niya.
Lines.
Yung transformation niya, no, as president.
Naging more kenko.
Malaki.
ang lit
malaki.
ng margin ng win niya eh. Sobra.
Sabi
Which
nga,
was-
nandaya pa eh.
Oh, si Miriam was
That
complaining
was
about it the whole
question.
time.
Yeah.
But yeah, but going back to that, kasi yung PCO, the current PCO,
Presidential
wants to,
Communications Office.
Presidential Communications Office, wants to restrict yung people covering Malacanang. May qualifiers ngayon, may qualifications ngayon na gusto i-impose yung PCO doon sa kung sino pwede mag-cover sa Malacanang.
So,
Pero kasi
dalawang qualifiers.
as
Number
a
one,
practice, no, as a practice, those reporters who covered the candidate when he was running usually becomes the member of the presidential reporters.
The press corps.
Press corps.
But that's a decision by the agencies.
Yes.
Dahil may magkakilala
Decision
sila.
by the newspapers and television.
Pero this time
Oftentimes.
around, sila yung Malacanang ang nagbibigay ng
Yung ng,
restriction, ng
guidelines.
qualifiers. So, dalawa yun eh. Number one, the media outlet should have been in existence for 5 years. And number two,
So legacy, dapat may
oo,
legacy.
And then number two, dapat yung reporter na papadala ng outlet should have
Senior.
been within the working for that media for some time.
So ayaw nila
So-
ng mga walk-in types na fly
So
with the night.
allegedly, kasi may nag-abuse daw ng press credentials nila.
Right.
But-
Well, curiously, yung complaint nila about the reporter who allegedly abused the credentials was, number one, that reporter is no longer identified with that agency, but she was still covering in Malacanang.
So nagpanggap siya.
Oo. So it had nothing to do with the question of gaano katagal yung agency at kung gaano katanda na siya sa pagiging reporter.
It was more of pretending that she was still
It was
working
more
for that
wala na siyang
organization.
she was not representing anymore anybody.
So you're saying overreaction itong change in
Well, in the end, but do you want your
SOP?
sources to be choosing who gets to cover them?
And then may isa pang big red flag, which is they can revoke your accreditation based on false reporting. Who gets to determine
What is true
false?
and what is
Yan,
What is
oo.
fake reporting? Yan dyan tayo Yan yung delikado.
Yung parang, that sounds like Trump.
Well, yes.
Well,
Diba?
Trump was even Associated Press.
Yun na nga.
They
Yun.
wanna use
No, they-
Voice
they,
of
ano,
America.
Yun na nga.
They were at the risk of losing it, and then next
Oo.
thing you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend or something, meron siyang access to White House.
So now
Yung-
yung
question kay Zelensky. Yun
Why
yung
are you
tanong
not
kay
wearing a
Zelensky.
tie, a
tama.
suit?
Yun yung boyfriend
Why
niya
are you
yata,
not
may
wearing a
nagsabi sa-
suit?
Yeah,
Oo.
like, Mr. President, don't you have any suit? Yung that guy, you know. So those types get into the press.
How long was
corps.
he?
I mean, exactly. Like that guy wouldn't pass this rigid. Malacanang, our guidelines would have filtered out those type of people.
So yun nga, it has shades of that. Kasi yung AP versus Trump case is now in the courts.
Yeah.
The
right?
Gulf of
They-
America
they
versus
each
the
sue
Gulf
each
of
I think
other.
the
Mexico
court
issue.
ordered the reinstatement of AP.
Oo, they ordered it. Tapos the Trump administration pushed back ulit. So now they're
And also, they're
seeing it
pushing
through.
back against specific journalists from specific
Oh,
organization,
yeah.
right?
Tapos
Like-
nag-create sila ng a seat for new media. Kasi
Yeah.
remember, Trump rose to power because of the He didn't go-
podcasters and all.
Correct.
Yeah.
Hindi siya nag-traditional media. He went straight to the podcasters. He went straight to the content creators like si Joe Rogan, right? That was his,
Although he was not the most problematic podcaster. No, but I want to go back to this. I mean, are we in a phase whereby, kasi kanina minention mo, di ba, na pati si Ramos na gets na kailangan niya, he has to up his game and evolve his game. Now we're 2025, a completely revolutionary information landscape. My sense is, I don't know how many iterations the PCO has been going through over the past year alone, on how many leadership change and all. But my sense is they're still trying to find their footing because they're dealing with three things at the same time. One is you have a president who doesn't seem to be spontaneous enough in ways Ramos and definitely Digong were. I'm still waiting for the fireside chat.
Oo nga eh,
I've
ako
been
din
hearing
eh.
about for that.
Oh, sabi niya monthly, dapat.
Yeah, I'm open pa to do a podcast style with him. Sit down, let's see, right? The other one is of course sino bang in charge sa PCO, sino bang leadership, ano bang gusto nila. And third, yung legacy ng Digong time na kung sino-sinong quote-unquote vlogger ang nakapasok, which BBM initially continued in the golden era of Uniteam and then now it goes south. So they're dealing with three communication challenges at the same time. So I'm not saying I'm sympathetic to these changes. I'm saying more like I think they're under pressure to come up with a new modus
A
vivendi.
new structure.
New
A
structure,
new direction.
new terms of reference.
Under new PCO
Yeah,
Secretary
exactly.
J. Ruiz. True.
But it's
That's
also a
good
step
point.
back kasi remember, panahon
What?
ni Digong, that was the time that the president banned a news agency, Rappler, from covering Malacanang. Pierre Añada was not even allowed to get inside the palace, the palace grounds.
Tsaka
Sa labas pa lang,
sa
hinarangan na siya.
mga events outside,
Oo.
she was
So
barred
she
from
had to
covering.
cover
Oh,
online.
yeah.
Online. And that was parang, they may have differences with Rappler, pero in the end, Rappler's a news agency.
I mean, forget Rappler, right? He made good on his promise to shut down ABS. Di ba?
Yeah.
Matagal niyang tinithreaten yun. And none of us believed it could happen because ABS was so big at that time. And then
Yeah.
it did happen.
And
So-
then 4 times they were saying that we had nothing to do with it.
Oo.
Even
oo.
though in 4 speeches he said, I will shut you down.
Yeah.
The
yeah.
double speak,
Yeah.
no? Yung double speak. Yeah.
Pero anyway, yung mga presidents naman, they hated some reporters.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, Cory was very uncomfortable.
nosy reporters, no?
Cory was very uncomfortable with
Oh.
the media. I covered Cory. From
Oh, wow.
Ayaw niyo magpa-interview, magpa-ambush.
Oo, from 89 to mga 91.
So how was Cory? Okay, before round, I'm curious. Actually, I haven't heard that story.
Very, very uncomfortable with the media.
Hindi siya spontaneous because Ninoy
Hindi
was
siya
a very
media-
spontaneous
hindi siya media
communication guy.
darling.
Oo,
Ninoy
very different
was
from
like,
Ninoy.
yeah,
Very different from Ninoy.
Ninoy was like all over the
Si
week.
Cory, if she could avoid us, she would.
Oh, wow.
Tapos bihira rin magpa-interview with us. Usually si Buddy Gomez yan or si
Kaya
Didi
pag
Sitaco.
ambush ayaw niya.
Ambush ayaw niya.
Oh.
So BBM is more like Corazon Aquino.
In fact,
Than his father,
but si
yeah.
Bongbong is a veteran politician.
That's
He's a
also
veteran politician.
true.
He's been,
Oo.
Oo,
he's
1980s
been
pa
in politics
governor na yan eh.
Vice
governor.
Si
Oo.
Cory came in from the cold, and to a degree, you'd try to have some understanding of what she's going through. Na biglang she's deluged with so many questions
Suddenly,
that she has no
highest position
expertise
kaagad
with.
siya.
Yeah.
Pero she was besieged not at the same level, worse kasi may coup
May coup attempts pa.
na Grenada, na RPG nila hunasan yung Malacanang. I mean, you cannot blame them having literally a siege mentality. I was told even Pinoy also had, kind of or you could say a ricochet of that. Na
He was also uncomfortable with the
inexplained
Oh,
process.
yeah. He was very
He was
uncomfortable.
also,
Well, he had a bullet
mas
shrapnel
grabe
in his neck,
mas grabe
right?
si Cory.
Literally, yeah.
Mas grabe si Cory's uncomfortableness. with
Why
the
do you
press.
think? Where is that from? Is it because they felt the media is hostile? Is it because of lack of confidence in their ability to be
All
spontaneous?
presidents think the media is hostile,
Yeah.
right? Because we have to ask the questions that they
Unfriendly.
don't want to answer,
Yeah.
right? And
And sometimes they don't understand that these are things that have to be asked
oh,
because
or
somebody
they
has
do
asked them.
understand they have to be asked, but still they don't like it.
Ang classic si Gloria.
Another interesting
Kasi before the Hello
Our
Garci,
longest serving post-Marcos president. yeah.
before Hello Garci, she was very friendly. Pagka-interview pa yan, madalas sa hotel room niya. Nung nag-Hello Garci, cut off. Walang media interview.
So that's what I'm saying.
Matagal kayo na-cut off?
Oo, mula nung Hello Garci, 2005, hanggang matapos siya.
Ah, okay.
But that's the thing, right? Sometimes presidents feel they're just unfair and hostile. Sometimes the presidents no, they cannot explain some things
Oh.
because may mali silang ginawa or something dodges.
Or hindi
That's
lang
different.
sila
Yeah,
articulate.
hindi sila the same level, right?
That's true.
There's, I mean, I think, Duterte was very spontaneous, guys. Speaking of our friends in Rappler, my number one source of information about Digong when no one was taking him seriously was Rappler. It was only Maria Ressa who bothered to sit down with you, have the hour-long conversation. Our friends in Rappler were the one. I mean, you look at the content on Digong in 2015. I don't think anyone could beat Rappler. My greatest source of information was Rappler. So that was an ugly divorce, if I can put it that way. Because in the beginning, I was teaching in LaSalle back then. I remember that Rappler event na parang my president, choose my something like that. Si Digong lang nagpakita. So for a year at least or two, this was like the two disruptors together, right? Rappler was a disruptor in the media world. I'm not putting them on the same moral plane. But Duterte was a disruptor in the information political world, and they kind of were like jiving. And then the ugly divorce happened, inevitably. So,
When presidents are running, they like the publicity.
Oh,
because
yeah.
they're being-
especially if they're
Oh, yeah.
unknown ones like
Yeah,
Digong,
like-
Oh yeah, then you
but
need the media.
once you're there, then you have to face the music.
Oh.
And then that's when it becomes uncomfortable.
And then that's also a good point because they think that when they're running, of course, they get asked different questions. Tapos when they're in position na, they expect us to also ask to be a bit friendlier, to ask softball questions, ganon. But now you're asking questions around policy. And why did you do this? And why did you do
but
that?
BBM is an interesting case, right? I mean, he didn't attend any legit debate. No offense to SMNI, right? And then later on, once the unity was falling apart, he felt maybe actually the legit media is more amenable to his version of reality than the completely other side, which is an alternative universe. You know what I'm saying? So, like, BBM is a very fascinating case. Veteran politician, but during election, very much avoiding any legitimate platform. No offense to some of our
Ano yung
friends.
magkamali?
Right. No, and then later on, 'di ba? Yung nagwatak-watak ng Uniteam, you could feel na his team, at least if you've known himself, they feel like, wait lang, I think the mainstream media at least gives me a chance to get the facts out and facts checked. Unlike the other ones who have
But he's
political
still
agenda.
not giving away. Still not doing press conferences.
No.
He's still not answering questions.
He did one, right? And remember yung sabi
But
na our inflation
Saka
is
Candy
not
Oro.
that high? Sabi na our inflation is not that high, and then yung not that high ginamit ng tao. Of course, people know what's
Naging
there.
meme.
Naging meme, and then the next day he had to call joke no to explain. I think he got burned. Because remember, one of the first things he said is he will be his own spokesman. Remember when he had this
Yeah.
press conference explaining why he's going to take over the Department of Agriculture? He was very confident. He was very confident. In fact, when he was president-elect doon sa bagong Pilipinas headquarters nila, di ba? He immediately came out. So actually, BBM is very interesting. He was very evasive, and then when he becomes president, he becomes gracious, etc. And then suddenly, there's that, we're not that high inflation. Then, so, he has that kind of tendency whereby if there's a little bit of resistance or pushback, he recalibrates but if he feels he's
Hindi-
like in a
hindi siya-
position of
hindi siya,
strength,
oo.
he's regardless. Like, for
Oo.
instance, have you seen him in like World Economic Forum, in Lowy Institute?
Yeah.
Everyone's impressed with him because he knows like, oh well, no one is here after me. They're
They're
happy
not going
to
to
host
ask me about
And then-
PhilHealth, or they're not going to ask
and
me
they like
about,
what I say because
yes.
I'm anti-China,
Or hidden
pro-US.
wealth.
Exactly.
So he
Or hidden wealth.
shines in those environments, posh environments, and then suddenly, pag,
Because those are also controlled in a way. So like if the Lowy Institute invites him, for instance, it's under the banner of talk about the Philippines'
Foreign
position
policy,
against
period.
China, right?
Yeah,
Right.
period.
So he comes in as a the flag bearer
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
Philippines, right?
and he loves
Iba
that. He
yun.
would love that. Yeah.
Iba yun
But remember when
versus
he was
ano.
interviewed by the Australian correspondent?
oh,
Remember
yes.
that? He was asked about hidden wealth. He gets flustered.
Yeah.
And
That
he's
was
all over
quite
the place.
That was a very bad
punchy,
interview.
punchy.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Buti
He wasn't
pumayag pa siya.
expecting it.
He didn't. Maybe he didn't expect it.
Yun nga, meron siyang
We should have
tendency
expected
to
it.
Kasi usually
to
pag
grill.
in-interview yung presidents, they ask advanced question.
Oo. Yes.
Yeah, but the Australians are not gonna. They care for their own credibility. I don't think any legitimate Australian journalist, and they're all legitimate last time I checked, would have survived like just softballing a Marcos,
Yeah.
which is quite a notorious name in Australia. I used to spend a lot of time in Australia. Like
And-
Marcos,
and-
seriously, like.
and I'm sure
Yeah.
he's not going to grant another that
No, I
network
think-
ABC another.
So he got burned
interview.
probably there, but I would say more yung we're not that high in inflation one. Because you could see he suddenly became confident after he won, and then suddenly he went back into shell. Ang problem naman kasi is, kaharap mo yung mga Dutertes and Bato and all who are in the news cycle 24/7. Like my algorithm is either Bato doing a barbecue, Bato's interview with someone here, someone there.
Putting on a disguise.
Or Sarah reacting to people saying Marcos. Like the information space is completely dominated either by hatred or love for Dutertes, which is still good for Dutertes, right? So ang question ngayon, BBM has to have, he has to reinvent himself. He has to step it up because in few months it will be legacy years, and in few months big existential questions will come up. Kaya that's why I love you. Sabi mo nag-evolve si Ramos because he's another Ilocano president we have had in recent memory. And I had long conversation with Ramos, and parang he was talking about, you know, you have to step up the game, you have to evolve. I mean, he went from a rigid military guy to a kind of a, well, at least for himself, stand-up comedian. I remember, like, he would go like that, and then he'll do his finger in his eyeglasses, like, there's no, this is fake.
Walang lens.
And then he'll throw away like, I see that attempt, right? I mean, I appreciate that attempt. Like, so, I don't know, maybe if Ramos could evolve, maybe BBM has to learn at least one thing from...
Oh, yes.
Last 3
Pero,
years na.
ang problema ko sa mga presidents, they expect the reporters who covered him during the campaign
To be the same?
to be in the presidential beat and then will be friendly to him.
Yun na nga. Ayun na nga.
Oo.
Yeah.
Parang
It's
tayo-tayo
familiarity.
no?
It's
Tayo-tayo.
familiarity. Oo.
So, they do not want reporters to be very nosy, questioning them, or criticizing them. Yun ang problema ngayon ng presidente.
They want you to write about them,
in a good way.
From their perspective.
but they don't want you to write about what they're doing.
Yeah. Especially when there are some secrets that they want to keep.
Yeah.
Like the last time we had an interview with Bongbong Marcos, I remember it was in 2015. He came here as a vice presidential candidate. We had a forum here. I grilled him about hidden wealth.
Yeah.
And since then, he never agreed to talk
Pati
to
kay
us.
Jessica Sowan.
Just
diba?
like
That-
si Senator Amy Marcos. She's not come back to your show. Nakapag-interview na kami, pero not to your show. After,
Well, she does, but only for specific topics.
correct.
And she knows that I cannot go
they will lay
beyond
down
that.
the
Because,
groundwork. They will lay down rules around it. Before
but even
they
then,
show
kasi you
up.
don't want to go into other topics because may urgent topic eh. I don't want to talk about hidden wealth when there's another bigger story to talk about. It'll be so out of the blue. But yun nga, I remember that kasi I asked him, how do you account for your money? How do you account for the Swiss bank accounts that you laid claim to?
Yun din yung kinigalit ni Senator Amy sa inyo, right? Because you guys pressed her on, because her answer, if I recall, was that her dad was a successful lawyer before he joined politics.
yeah, but that's not what the Supreme Court ruling said. In fact, your father never even had a law office.
A lot of mythologies were going on there.
And your father, the former president's SALN in 1964 was 165,000 pesos.
Pero it's a good point what you said about yung the noise is dominated by the Duterte side.
Duterte,
Because
yeah.
nakikita na natin yun sa surveys, yung latest Pulse Asia survey.
And
what
Okta
Ronnie-
survey also, kanina
Remember
lang.
what Ronnie Holmes
Yeah.
said to us?
Mm.
Yung latest, which is around late March that they did, Sarah jumped in her approval and trust ratings. And he said,
59%.
number one, the delay of the impeachment helped her. Number two, don't forget, every day she was in the news cycle that week kasi nasa Hague na siya nun eh.
Yeah.
Every day she was giving press conferences, every day kung ano nung sinasabi.
And of course, she
little
looked like
bits and pieces.
the daughter who was so so
Caring
concerned and
and
caring.
loving daughter.
And you know, that
Ayun,
touches
eh.
a
Oh, well,
chord.
I'm having a hard time. Like, she has more approval rating than last year when she had an actual job.
But you
You know, it's like
it's
approval
perception.
rating
It's
of
perception
It is
eh.
perception.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
Like,
it's
that's why sometimes I
perception.
don't want to take surveys seriously. Like,
Yeah.
because you cannot treat democracy like stock market. What is the
Oh.
latest price? Once you go down that road, it gets dangerous. Kaya ako, as much as I cite surveys, I also say there's so much dissonance in surveys.
Oh, yeah.
Surveys don't make sense.
Oh, yeah.
Ang daming nagsabi na ayaw nila ng corrupt politician, ayaw nila ng
Well, that's-
pro-China
yeah, that's true.
politicians, and then you suddenly
And then
like,
you have-
I'm not sure about that.
Hindi
you know?
natin ma-reconcile yung issues with
Yeah.
surveys around the personalities. One of the other things that Ronnie Holmes told us, most people that they surveyed, they think the job of the House Speaker is to speak for the President. Hindi nila alam.
Speaker eh.
Oh, kasi speaker yung
Buti
title.
nga hindi
eh.
Bluetooth
So parang may dissonance talaga. You're absolutely correct to point it out.
Or sometimes just lack of proper appreciation of the nuances
Yeah.
of the job, right?
Yeah.
Or the fact that the Supreme Court Chief Justice usually has the lowest, usually, but
Mm-hmm.
not always, also tells you like parang kung hindi action-oriented yung office mo, meaning action in sense na magbigay ka ng ayuda, declare war, there's also lack of appreciation for that. That's
For
why
what
your
you do.
senators are forced to act as if they're little presidents,
Oo.
when in fact their job is actually being fiscalizers. So I think that's why, for me, like sometimes we overread into surveys, or sometimes
Yes.
you just have to
Kulang
take it.
ng
Yeah.
nuancing.
And
Kulang
what
ng
happens
nuancing.
is that you feed into this stock market style politics, which is, oh, I'm now higher, so I'm doing something right,
Yeah.
right? And it's doing something right in terms of performative
Yes.
optics, right?
Yes.
I use the term for performative populism kay Digong because it was never about his actual achievements, right? It was about what he was projecting, care, decisiveness. And unfortunately, we're still in that era. Kaya in an era of performative, optics-driven information landscape, talagang hindi ka magtataka yung mga
Hindi,
presidente are worried because one bad optic, I mean, in my case, one problematic term could cost you months of bashing, right? Like,
May
even-
hugot na naman.
Oh,
That's what I'm
yeah.
saying, like-
But you learned a lot of things from it,
Oh,
right?
I'm so,
kita.
I'm such a nice guy.
So everything is a
Maybe once I become president, I'll show how to deal with this.
Naku,
But
yun yung mga hirta yan. Delikado ka na naman dyan.
no, but kidding aside, kidding aside.
Delikado yan.
Kidding aside.
Qualify man.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
may
you have
chance
seen-
pa to change, for him to
Yun
change,
nga
to
eh.
step up.
Is there any
Oh.
lesson from history for BBM to make adjustments?
I think so. Kasi he sell 3 years, ano?
Oh.
Legacy
3 years
years,
remaining.
yeah.
Oh.
Mm. So,
And after this election, lame duck ka na pababa.
Wala
Ayan.
nga eh.
Oo.
Oo, yun na nga eh.
especially last 2 years, wala na.
Well, basically, you have one and a half
So,
years
so
at most,
getting
right?
people to toe the line,
Yeah.
it's gonna be more difficult after this election.
What is your read of someone like Claire Castro coming in? Someone who's kind of a vlogger,
Yeah,
journalist.
that's what-
Similar to me, like kind of like
Yeah.
mixes both worlds. I think she's effective and yet at the same time,
Not
also not effective, right? Like she's effective in a sense na may palaban, may attack mode, but at the same time, but Sarah's numbers are also doing well. So how do you make sense out? What is your read? She was there at the event the other day, right?
question of her, the timing of her appointment remains a question at this point. Kasi baka yun na yung, to some people, that's the signal that the administration is changing tack.
Right.
Because before, si President Marcos would never give press conference, as we were just saying, right? Suddenly, you have a Claire Castro, and suddenly there's a daily press conference. And she was appointed just a few weeks before the arrest of Duterte, right? So parang,
So tingin mo parang you were hired to explain that.
well,
process.
we asked her
What to
that.
attack?
We asked her that. Of course,
Yeah.
she denies it. I'm not saying she's lying. What I'm saying is
There's a timing, there's a context.
there's
yeah.
a timing to it, and the fact that before si BBM would never, she's non-confrontational. Everybody knows that. Hindi siya, yun nga,
Yeah.
he avoids the media. He doesn't generally hit out at his
Opponents, yeah.
alliances. I mean, his enemies. Diba, for a long time, they were putting up a front na. Unity team is intact. Don't worry. Everything is status quo, etc. Pero suddenly, parang may biglang shift may biglang change in terms of
But
the
her,
narratives.
but she's not the presidential spokespress officer. So
Yun
that's
na
what-
nga eh.
Parang weird. yun nga eh,
Exactly. She doesn't speak for
this
the
is weird.
president.
Press officer.
Oo.
Palace
Is
press
she a
officer.
spokesman? She's not. If BBM is his own spokesman, where is the?
So what is she? She speaks for
Yun nga.
Malacanang.
Oo,
Malacanang.
but she
But she
always
does not
says
speak for the president.
She doesn't speak for the president, sabi.
So what is Malacanang?
The office,
The
of, the
office of the
president.
These the embodiment of the,
The-
Philippine state
the
and the
institution.
sovereignty of the Filipino
Oh,
people.
yeah, thank
Medyo
you.
may mga
Thank
ganon,
you.
diba?
So what is it? So what? Malacanang speaks for itself. Different
Yeah,
from
it's
president.
a disembodied entity that.
Yeah, Mr. Brown dun sa baleta.
Diba? Yun yung
You know
bizarre.
Mr. Brown?
eh.
Well, the problem is, yung mga spokesperson ngayon, they cannot second guess the president.
And they cannot
No.
get ahead of him.
Oh.
That's what I noticed. Like, they might say something and then yung pala hindi komportable si BBM to go
Oo,
that far.
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And to be fair to BBM, earlier this year, in fairness dun sa lawag speech niya, opening speech niya for the event, he suddenly said, okay, maybe eto na,
Yung
finally,
yung
right?
ratrat niya.
Banat.
Banat, oh.
Ang problema naman niya, yung team niya mismo ang hindi sumuporta sa kanya.
Nobody said anything.
Sa Allianza,
Wala.
basic, and not to mention a lot of those people in Allianza, like we know what they were doing during Duterte's time. So minsan naman,
But
malas din siya.
surprisingly, in that event, si Aimee raised his hand.
Well, it was in Lawag, and she
Diba?
was like, to question her brother. You mean?
Hindi. Nagtaas na sila ng
Tinaas yung
kamay.
In
sa
terms
lawag.
of sino ang ganon?
Pagkatapos
Oo.
siya bakbakan si Duterte,
Yeah.
Aimee comes forward and raises his hand. So parang
Raises BBM's hand.
Parang the impression was, sama-sama tayo dito sa pagbakbak. That was the impression. And then,
It didn't last long,
a month
did it?
later, a month later,
The last
goodbye
round, no?
Philippines.
Show support.
The first and the last. Like, that was
Pero
it.
kasi lawag Maybe it's,
Yeah,
it
it's
has
home,
deeper
your home base.
laws,
You have to
home
show.
base,
People would want.
You
Kaya
have
nga
to
sabi
show
ko,
unity pa rin.
Aimee is making a big risk because, loyalty for us Ilocanos is a big thing. Yeah, you can have policy differences, but this is not looking like policy. This looks like something else to a lot of people, right? Especially siding with Sara at this point in time. Kaya, I'm not making an excuse for BBM. What I'm saying is that he had some efforts. Nung naging president-elect siya, nung nag-explain siya bakit kailangan ng Secretary of Agriculture na temporary siya mag-take over, when he did this lawak speech. And then, but the moments when he tried to step up, that's where there was no follow-through, or I think that we're not that high part was a bit below the belt, the way the media made the meme out of that. Because let's be honest, like, diba? Like parang, because if you watch the whole press conference, okay naman, like averagely okay for me, diba? It was just that part, and then people emphasized that, and then it became a joke
but
and
see,
meme.
here's the other side of that argument. As the leader of a country,
That makapal
should
mukha
be
mo.
all exactly. That should be all, you should be bulletproof. You should that's small
Anti-fragile.
things, right?
Yeah.
That's a small thing. Right? You get burned here, there, whatever. You are the leader of 110
You're absolutely
million
correct.
Filipinos, which is also the same reason why I was very disappointed that I haven't heard from him on the tariff issue, right? So, ayun
Talagang may
naman-
hugot yan si
May
Reggie.
hugot.
Frederick
May hugot
Go.
talaga si
Si
Reggie
Frederick Go.
yan. Dalawang linggo na yan.
Dalawang linggo na. I
Dalawang
still
linggo na yan.
haven't heard from him. Kasi nga, feeling ko, it's not about the tariff per se. It's the fact that the global economic order has changed.
Yeah, the
I wanna
Singaporeans
hear
spoke
from-
very strongly.
I want to hear from my president. Okay, what's our strategy? What's the
Yeah.
direction moving forward? Here was a chance for you to show leadership, I thought. So far, no one has spoken except Secretary Frederick Go. And yung first his answer pa niya was that, well, look, it's not so bad. In my view, it's good
may
kasi
half
we're
empty,
second
half
to the
full.
last. Second
Yeah,
to the
except
last
Singapore got 7% less tariffs and they were in panic bottom.
Exactly.
So like
Exactly.
it didn't look good, right?
Yes.
Like you guys get 70%, you're okay.
Prime
They get,
Minister Wong,
yeah, he
spoke
was
to the
like
public.
Yes,
he
because,
did a
because
Facebook speech
yes,
like this is
exactly.
new era uncertainty, but they only got 10%.
Yes.
And they're exporting like crazy and investing like crazy in US.
Pero
so-
they're a much bigger export-oriented country. We're
city
not.
state.
Pero still, the point being, okay, the international order has changed. Trump has appended everything. So, how is the Philippines navigating this?
Maybe it's also because he didn't want to
Right.
alienate Trump. Because when you have Duterte allegedly backed by China, you're in a corner. The last thing you want to do is to piss off Trump.
Especially
Say something
since he's anchored our foreign policy heavily on the U.S.,
that,
right?
or he doesn't want that Trump will also be against him, right? Like imagine
Oh.
you're already against a young China, galit sayo for everything you've been, and then Trump is also not on your side. You'll be like in the position of Europeans, and you don't want to be there. And that's why you see yung interaction niya. Usap tayo, di ba, when I was in Brussels
Yeah.
with Pick Hexet, right? It was super friendly and because I think for BBM it was important to make sure Trump is behind him. Why? Because remember, Trump is against ICC. He had an executive
Yeah.
order against ICC. So the last thing you want to do at this point in time to sound like you're attacking Trump or anything like that. To be fair, Vietnam, which is a very tough country, immediately said we're willing to bring all our tariffs on US to
Exactly.
zero.
But-
So again, it might sound like I'm just trying to see the logic for
Alright.
BBM, not to say much, kasi parang yari ka eh. If you
Oo.
criticize Trump, you're risking something dangerous.
Yeah.
And then if you also not criticize him and say like what Frederick Go basically did, you'll be also bashed because you'll be compared with the Singaporean Prime Minister
Yeah.
who was in a panic mode and in a 10% tariff rate, 7% lower than us. So I just felt there was no win. What he could have done is to pivot to a bigger picture, which is say, okay, we don't know what's gonna happen here. Things are changing on a daily basis. We're basically giving them the script, right?
Yes.
But that's why the Philippines has to be more self-reliant. We have to build our own
That's
manufacturing.
exactly
We have
my
to
point.
So it will be
Yeah.
tariff, but not
Yeah.
really tariff,
Yes,
right?
that's
More like
exactly
rally the
my
people.
point.
Yeah,
Rally the
exactly.
people.
Kaya nga yung fireside
And
chat
tell
na
them
nasaan,
I'm on top of
because
this, I'm doing
yun
something
yung
about it,
chance
we're
niya
thinking
eh.
about it.
And it's not gonna be live, so you can take...
And the fact that you have to react quickly, right? So you mentioned Vietnam. What did Vietnam do? Tumawag ka agad sa
Immediate-
DC.
and
They
declared.
immediately talked to Trump and
Yeah.
said, we're willing to bring tariffs down to zero. Okay, that's an opening. And Trump said, we had very productive talks with Vietnam. Great. So
And they
I mean,
hosted Xi Jinping.
That's within
Then
24
also,
hours.
yeah, so everyone is
Exactly.
moving. Yeah, yun nga.
Exactly.
You're-
So that's
I
my
agree
point.
with that.
It's like you don't have
I
to
agree with
criticize Trump. You don't have to praise Trump. But tell us what's happening in this new world order for the Philippines, right?
And if the economy is not going to do well because of these tariffs and everything, at least may excuse ka. So actually use that to your advantage, right? At
Yeah.
least explain. Kung magkakaroon tayo ng economic slowdown, disruptions, hindi ko nakasalanan yan, things are happening without
Everything
personally
is
attacking
Trump.
Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's signaling anyways. What are you
Yeah.
signaling here? What is your message to everybody, right?
You know, the most amazing transformation I've seen in my life as far as PR and presidents are concerned is Zelenskyy. So we saw Zelenskyy in 2022 Munich Secret Conference, just a week before Russia invaded. He was a bit parang flustered, tapos parang he was, awkward, he was scared to say anything like that. The show, the star of the show was Boris Johnson. Like Boris Johnson, the room was filled. And then like you could see like he's a bit pushing back. Biden said there could be war. No, there's not really war. And at the same time, it was really like all over the place. Kaya I was so amazed how he immediately transformed into totally something else. Seeing him doing live, I'm still here in Kiev. We can
I
be
remember
killed.
those lives.
Like, oh my. So there was a part of him apparently all this time waiting for that emergency moment, and it came out. So I'm not saying BBM is Zelensky, and thank God we're not being invaded.
But it's true that crisis reveals true leaders. Right?
Don't we have
It's
enough crisis
moments
already?
of crisis that show the
Haven't
true
we had enough
leaders.
crisis already for the true leaders to come out?
Ano ba bang hinintay natin? Invasion ng Taiwan? What is the threshold for BBM?
Invasion
That's a
ng
good
Sandy
question.
Cay.
That's a good
Baka
question.
threshold ang hinahanap niya eh.
Oo.
But what if this argument is this? All of you chattered in classes. I became the president with the highest margin, right?
Without talking to you.
Without doing much in my life, right? Like parang, I didn't have to do any of
Without addressing any of the
And
issues
I'm
being tossed around
Here's
to
the,
all
like,
candidates.
Yun yung lesson niya.
And his love around the world, in the West at
Yeah.
least. I mean, I've been talking to Europe, everyone loves him. So, part of me is saying, and I got Digong to jail in ICC. No one would have expected that, right? So, I'm also sure there's something at the back of their head which is saying, parang like when Macron said to journalists, my ideas are too complex for journalists, and then sumabla yung election. Remember when he called for referendum just when German like alternative? So feeling ko baka may ganun din sila, may Macronish thinking. No, my ideas, like my safe
I
and
don't have to
steady.
explain my stuff
Yeah,
to you.
to
I can make things
journalists.
happen.
Diba? Something like that.
Who knows?
Yun
Maybe.
lang. Ang problema is, if you think like that, maghanap ka ng confirmation bias to just prove that we're wrong and he's right. But I don't know. I think everyone sees na he has to step up, and hindi pwede si Claire Castro lang or someone else. And those people cannot also step up if he doesn't step up because they cannot get ahead of him, right? So yun yung informational constraints na meron tayo.
Si Claire Castro, shock absorber yan.
Yun din, in
Oh,
fairness sa
shock
kanya.
absorber and lightning rod. Diba? Lahat siya ang tatama ng kidlat.
Oo, siya. Siya yung nagsasalita eh.
Pero wala siyang approval rating kailangan, di ba?
Wala.
Last time I checked, she doesn't care.
That's the point.
If she's
Diba?
gonna run, it will be 2028 pa naman, di ba?
Siya yung taga-barubal ng ibang tao. Diba? Awayin mo yan. Awayin mo yan.
Would she agree to that description?
Well, okay, let's look for a better one.
Pero at least,
Taga-barubalan
there's
na.
somebody talking now to the
Oo.
press from Malacanang.
Yes.
Kasi matagal na wala eh.
Oh, quiet lang nga eh.
Yeah, we'd
Naghahabol yung...
only have an occasional interview by Cheloy of the president
Oo.
na ang laki pa ng headroom na parang, pwede ba i-frame nyo mabuti? May RTBM naman.
or before Claire Castro, it would be yung they would schedule cabinet secretaries to do press con. Sometimes hindi naman yun yung issue
Hindi
of
na
the day.
storya.
Oo, hindi naman yun yung storya.
Ba't
Parang,
bigyan tayo?
oo,
Anong issue yan?
let's say, NEDA sec.
Agenda nila.
Tapos iba yung issue. Oo.
Agenda nila yung pinupush nila.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
but yun nga, you cannot also make it like just news cycle driven. What if purong one cabinet lang every day you have to bring out? Let's say, diba? Let's say there's a food crisis for 1 month. Kawawa yung agriculture secretary. Every day you have to bring them out. And then yung ibang secretary. I don't know.
there is a food crisis,
There
by
must,
the way.
no, that's what I'm saying. So that means every day dapat the agriculture
ngayon
secretary has to be out, right?
Ngayon nag-i-issue yung 20 peso rice
Yun
again
nga eh.
kasi election. So, Comelec has granted the
Pwede,
the
pwede
exemption
magbenta.
na pwede magbenta ng 20 peso ang kilo.
Until the
Okay,
end of the
na.
year. Yeah, until the end of the year. That's the plan. That's their plan.
Despite the ban on ayuda during election, that they were, the administration was given this. And
Tsaka
ang
targeted
sagot
in
ni
Visayas.
Where there's a
But-
lot of room
But
for
was it
improvement.
clear
Yeah.
how much we're subsidizing this rice for?
I think they would spend mga half a billion
Pesos.
to subsidize,
pesos.
no?
A day.
Kasi yun,
A day,
it
a day.
goes back down to the,
Oh,
goes
so
back to the
15
fact
billion
na
a month.
it's 20 pesos not because it costs less to
Bumaba,
produce it.
oo.
You're
but
just
because
subsidizing.
we're subsidizing more.
Oh.
We're
But ako,
paying
I'm
more for it.
okay with subsidy. You know why? Because like, sa ibang bansa, I had a conversation with the Department of Energy Secretary. It's very nice, very smart guy. And he was saying actually, misconception of Philippines has the most expensive utility because ours is without subsidy. If you look at just production cost, mataas. And the problem with food and fuel is that if hindi siya subsidized, grabe yung effect niya on the poorest section of the society and the overall inflationary effect. So in principle, I'm okay. But then again, you need a framework, you need an ideology, babalik tayo, exactly your point. Parang ako, ang suggestion ko doon is, there's always going to be a news cycle issue. Just use that as a pivot in a very Socratic method, and then bring it down to something else you want to talk about, right? A good communicator answers the questions he wants to answer to,
Yeah.
pretending answering to the question
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
asked of him, right?
But if you want to subsidize something, make sure that it's planned well and not because you just want to bring it
and
down.
not election
Oh,
time lang.
otherwise,
bigla.
you do it in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hindi,
Yeah.
kaya kailangan ng build your agricultural sector, build food security. It has to be a part of a bigger package. Industrial policy, basically, something like that. Yun nga, like, I just...
But and even then, yung may problematic, I think, yung framing of this eh. Kasi when it was announced, sabi nila, okay, that's our campaign promise fulfilled.
Right.
20 pesos.
But again, when you look at the whole context of it, parang was this the did
Paano
the
na-fulfill
promise
yung promise?
subsidized? Diba?
Subsidy.
And subsidy will only last so long.
Yeah.
Right? The point
In other
was
words, you
that
could have done it from day one if that's
you
the
could
way
have
you
done
want
it
to
from
do
day
it.
one.
It
Not
looks
during
like
an
desperate.
election,
It
not
looks like
during an
desperate,
election
yeah.
year.
Just to be fair again not to be fair, but to look at the context here, isn't BBM facing the most difficult communication landscape in a sense? On one hand, you have the whole Duterte machinery na 10 years na build up yan. It's one of the most advanced, disinformation machine, some would say, right? Na hindi lang baka isang power lang involved. We heard even maybe Russians were involved at some point. There was a report by Rappler, among others. And then your mainstream media is also a bit, skeptical and snooty of you and saying things that we're saying about him. Like, again, I'm not here to say like maawa tayo sa kanya. He's the president.
But
You
in
have to
this
step up.
complicated landscape.
But what I'm saying is that maybe, to be fair to him, he's actually in an unusually tough situation because both mainstream media and even more social media is not only hostile to him but completely disrespectful to him, besmirching him. Like, ako, ang suggestion ko, yung si First Lady, kung mag-post siya ng family picture, lock mo yung comment section. I remember even some pink word naawa kay First Lady. I never thought in my life I'll see pink people. Like, parang nung nakita daw, di ba nag-post nung, yung the other week, di ba? Si First Lady with the family. Ang babastos yung mga comments. And I said, why are
Dine-delete naman nila eh. I think
just
they
lock
delete
the
it.
comments. You have an option pa, only comments those you follow. Tapos, but like, grabe yung attack. And every time BBM speaks, yung emoji, of course, it's an operation, but you could see like, how can you concentrate on speech of a president when you can see all this laughter emojis going out, right? Like, it's so distracting, right?
Or yung angry face.
So,
Ay, angry face.
he has a problem, right? He doesn't have his own troll army or at least anything comparable.
Oh,
to-
really?
That's a troll army.
Okay,
Naniniwala si
who
Bo.
is this big influencer na ano? Like, I can name a lot for the other side.
Define big influencer because he still has people on his side who were major influencers nung may Uniteam pa.
Yeah, and then yung iba, nagsariling sikap na lang. Like, Sangkay Janjan, nasaan siya ngayon, right? That was the big, I'm just gonna
I don't know
name drop.
what does he do now. Is he still
Like,
BBM
some of
or
them just moved on kasi,
what about si Coach Jarrett?
yeah, but is he at the same level as, some of the other side? Like,
Sa
like
bagay, I don't
the
even
other
know
side,
this
like,
guy.
look at it, ang dami
Si
nila.
RJ Nieto.
Nawala na rin, basically.
Nawala.
Kasi parang basically nangyari sa kanila, they rose to prominence because of the Duterte side, then sinakyan nila yung Uniteam. And then when they went against Duterte, they got bashed right and left, right? The only one interesting guy is Banat Bay, for instance. Because in the case of Banat Bay, it's he's with Digong, but not necessarily with Sara. You know what I'm saying? So, and then he's attacking BBM, so he's kind of having it. But there are very few people who can pull that off because si Banat Bay, may malaki siyang following, meron na siyang, basically he has the foundation and structure. So, I cannot think really. I mean, even that coach
that's a good
guy,
point, too.
he's nowhere close to that. I know that because these people have been attacking me for the past 10 years and then I say, oh, wala na to, wala na to. And then yung mga natira are mostly anti-Duterte. Maharlika, I mean, pangalan pa lang, di ba? Although, of course, that's not the real name. I mean, they're all and hindi lang sila anti-Duterte, talagang the rhetoric, the cadence, even the words, it's so besmirched. It's not even debate. It's not a discuss. It's just character assassination 24/7, right? So,
Well,
Ed Lingao, I'm not saying let's be sympathetic to
no,
BBM. I'm just saying,
I'm not
mahirap
saying
yung position din niya, in
be
fairness.
sympathetic or not be sympathetic. But he's also reaping what he sowed. He's also reaping what he sowed.
So, maybe we can say in a Catholic way, this is his,
Karma.
he has, I mean, like, maybe.
No. But I also get his point. It's true. It's he's in an unusually difficult position. On the one hand, the whole landscape, we're talking about fighting off disinformation, which is so pervasive. How do you even fight it, right?
Yeah.
Ang daming issues. It's true. There's China. There's tariffs. There's natural disasters. Ang dami. It's all complex, interconnected crises, right? One after the other. So it's all of that is true. But it's also true that, like I said, crises begets leaders.
Did
right?
Ed Lingao just said deserve?
Deserve.
I didn't put it that way. I just said he's reaping what he
He just
sowed.
deserve. Well, I mean,
In what
yeah, I mean,
sense?
you
Well, how many since 2010, 2011?
ano yung Yellow Monkey case? Ano yun yung channel na yan?
Yeah,
Ano, visionist na pro-Marcos?
Pinoy Monkey something.
Pinoy Monkey. Yeah, like they started this whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Actually,
Ano
before
yun?
the
Anong tawag
DDS,
dun?
2010,
Get
11
Real
pa lang.
group.
There were two YouTube sites. There's a whole literature on that. How the disinformation machine was built. It was not Digong.
Oh,
It was the
okay.
pro-Marcos. And as early as 2010, 11, and attack nila si Pinoy. All of this noy-noying.
Okay.
started
I
with
didn't know
them.
that. Okay.
Right? So
Yeah.
you could say
We
from
did
a
a story about
spiritual
that.
point
Yeah,
of view,
from 2011 pa.
this is hunting you
Anong
back.
This was on Facebook.
Yeah, YouTube.
YouTube.
When none of us bothered YouTube.
YouTube, and then it migrated the set up a website, Get Real. Get
Pero
Real
yung
Philippines.
rabbit hole kasi ng YouTube is the worst eh.
Mm.
Yung algorithm nila, like they feed you more and more and more extreme of the same version. So perfect yun. Like Zelenskyy Janjan types, they thrive on YouTube. That monkey thing, that yellow monkey thing, it was there. So my point is, yes, you can also say mahirap maawa sa isang Marcos when it comes to being a victim of disinformation. But what is your alternative and what is the political situation? So on that note, our best wishes to the embodiment of the state. I think ganun na ba yan? Yung ating estado which carries the sovereignty and the democratic mandate of the Filipino people. Masarap talagang wala si Sir Ronald.
Pero
no?
the question
Mas
is
maganda
still,
yung
who is, ano ba talaga, the question remains, who is
Well,
speaking for Malacanang?
Oh my God.
Si Bongbong kasi magnet para attack talaga eh. Maski anong gawin mo.
Yeah.
Oh.
Damn if you do, damn if you don't. Might as well, damn it, just go with it, right? Parang Zelenskyy, right? Like, he's gonna be attacked anyway by Russians, by Trumpers.
But as you said, Zelenskyy transformed.
I love
and
the
then
guy.
he eventually
I love the guy.
earned the love and loyalty of his countrymen, for the majority
and a
of his
lot of people
countrymen.
around the world. So,
Yeah.
maybe pag-aralan niya si Zelenskyy.
He was tested in crisis.
And remember, Zelenskyy did podcasts with Lex Friedman and some of these guys who did the Trump thing. So he was not scared of even MAGA podcasters, if I can, sorry to put it that way. So, dapat ganon. So, I completely agree with you. Sorry na lang, pinili mo yan, naging presidente ka, ganyan ang mundo, harapin mo na. And as Ed Lingao said, deserve.
Everything you said boils down to one word.
Tayo dun.
Kasi mukha ni Ed parang, bakit tayo naawa sa kanya? Hindi naman naawa ka. I'm just trying to be fair. We're as journalists, Sharon.
nuancing and
Yeah, I was just
contradicting
nuancing.
and-
Hindi naman
yeah.
kasi siya communicator eh.